Hi, Denise Dryden here from Whitefish, Montana. And I picked this outside place because it's cold. It's like 35 degrees out. I've got my warm sweater on and my shawl, and I'm sitting on a horse blanket. And it just made sense to sit out here where nature is telling us what we're ready for. Nature is turning down the color. It's going inward, the roots are pulling back, and everything's going into that internal sort of rejuvenation, rebirth. And I don't know, I thought that was the best way to talk about this subject of generational pain. So if you don't have your cup of coffee, grab it, come sit down with me, and let's explore what do I mean by generational pain. And there's this little ongoing screen that I can see on the side of people who are signed in and watching. So if you have a question, go ahead and ask me, or just give me a thumbs up, or send a heart across the screen, or whatever you want, because this is for you. This part of this is me telling you what I'm discovering in my coaching, what's going on with me that I'm noticing, and sharing it with you. And the other part is interacting with all of you and finding out what you want to talk about. So let's explore this idea of generational pain. And you know, I got my notes. It makes it so much easier. I guess the first place I would start is, if you have no idea what generational pain is, Google it. Or, you know, use your search engine, Google generational pain, and the whole first page is so many interesting articles that come at it from different faith perspectives, different psychological perspectives, different patterns and belief disorders. And so it's actually becoming quite large. So Google it. I tried Amazon. They've got a few things on there, but I think that mostly Google it. Generational pain is that sticky, pervasive, sort of like something's going on and I don't know why I get caught up in it and I end up derailed. If I'm going this way, I end up over this way and it's not working for me. And so it's this sort of energy, it's this pervasive, sticky thing that hangs on us that isn't ours. I mean, the bottom line is it isn't ours. And so what we want to do is we want to look at, it's like this flu, it's like a virus. It's something that enters into the family system last generation, 5 generations ago, centuries ago, and starts weaving its way through our DNA, our cellular structure, our energy system, and it's passed on from one family member to the other. So it's not about blame, and it's not about pointing your finger at somebody and saying, you did this to me, like we like to do when we go through therapy and start working on parents. It's bigger than that. What it really is, well, I guess what I want to do is I want to start first with this premise that in all of my coaching presentations so far, we talk about the fact that we're role models for our children, and that our children come in as blank slates. They may have, you know, an open heart and an open soul, but they're a blank slate. And what they do is they see, they scan, like that little recorder, they record, and then they play it back to us. And so everything that we are, our children mimic and play back to us. So what I want to talk about is, when we're talking about generational pain, is let's be conscious about it. Let's find out what is mine, what is something bigger than me, what's my responsibility to pass it on, and what isn't. So it's cellular DNA based. It's a tightly wound vibration of beliefs and patterns that hold you in a certain structure. What I mean by these, and I've got this huge list, so I'm just going to read it off to you, is that confusion can be a generational pain. Doubt, victim energy, depression, self-worth, poverty, worry, fear, anxiety, anger, control, trauma, the way that we have PTSD, addiction, the way that we self-medicate and what we choose to self-medicate. And then, you know, on those really big ones for me is going to be the patriarchal rule. We have 2,000 years of patriarchal rule. How did we learn to reinforce that family member by family member in our cellular structure? Misogyny. What happens when we come from a family that has a deep, deep belief that women are not as valuable as men, and that they have this, well, you know, it's all over the news right now. I don't need to go into that. Narcissism. You know, what happens when we have a deep wound at birth and we carry that on, and then then we pass it on, and we pass it on, and we pass it on. So those are just some examples of what generational pain is. Eckhart Tolle, in his books, calls it the pain body. You know, what happens when you're going along and you make a change, or you want to grow, or you want to shift, and that pain body comes up and goes, here I am, what are you going to do about me? And you go, oh, yikes, there it is again. What is that? Where does it come from? And so what I'm here to invite you to do this October, this November, this December, and January, especially in the North American continent, in Europe, where it's starting to get cold and we're pulling inward and we're sort of holding ourselves in this self-exploration, is start to define what's mine and what's yours. What's mine? What do I own? You know, I own that I get really worried when I have an event going on, and I have a structure of how to self-cope and what supports me and what I know how to do. But what's not mine? Where does some of this anxiety or stress come from that's just knocks me off my my game every once in a while? So my personal experience with generational pain comes into this victim energy, which is these things happen, I'm not sure what to do about them, and they can become really overwhelming. And so for those of you who've known me in my 20s and my 30s, and especially in my 40s, there was this victim energy that just kept holding me like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then I would go through this over-exuberant flurry of activities and things to do to try to make myself feel better. But at the bottom line, there was this victim. And once I realized that the victim has been something that's been passed down for generations on both my family sides, it was enormous to realize that that's not mine. I don't have to deal with it. So way back when, in the late 90s, I was working with this little Basque therapist. I think she was all of 5'1", no, more like 4'11", maybe 5 foot, 72 years old when I was working with her back then. This woman told me that my role was to be the placeholder or the stakeholder. And I've heard both of them used interchangeably. And what it is to me is when we have a lineal energy like victim, like misogyny, where you're born into the family as a girl and your family doesn't appreciate or respect women. What happens when you come into a family that has long histories on both sides of self-medicating with alcohol, and each child grows up learning all of the coping skills of what to do when life is very uncertain. These kinds of generational pains, what happens is they weave themselves in and twist with us. So, you know, it's almost like this is our life, and then all of these patterns are all twisted around it, and we don't know which one is us and which one isn't. So what Miriam taught me to do in the late 90s was to realize that I'm the stakeholder. I'm the one who says, enough. I don't want any of this to interfere with me and my life, and I'm not going to let it go past me. I'm the stakeholder. It stops here. I'm going to do my work. I'm going to work on where my victim energy comes from, what this issue is, and then turn and refuse to pass it down to my children. Refuse to pass it down. And then also to believe that when I shift into something healthier, that I can trust that my children are going to shift with me. It's that 7 generations. When I shift my family system, that flu, that icky, sticky stuff goes up the generation into my parents and my grandparents and our memories, and it goes down into my children and my grandchildren. So this idea of generational pain and unweaving all of these sticky things that surround me are huge. So, you know, how do we do that? Well, first the thing to know is that it's not personal. You know, you weren't like tap, 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 you're the one who's going to play victim. It's pervasive. It's in the entire family system. Everybody's got a little bit of it in their body. So it's not personal. You're not the identified patient. It's unconsciously passed down. No parent would ever want that role of saying, oh, I did the best I could and I passed it on to my kid. I mean, that would be devastating. So it's unconscious. And the other part is that there's no blame. It doesn't, it's not going back up the line and saying, I would be fine except for this. It's more holding it in compassion and saying, look how many years our family has struggled with this issue. It's up to me now to be strong and to be the one who does my own work and stops this. So where I'm going to leave you is it's up to you. It's up to you to break the cycle. It's up to you to do your own work. It's up to you to give yourself enough time, like in this fall, in this introspection, to realize this is mine, and this stuff that's going on out here is asking for some attention from me. What am I going to do about these? Once I know that they're not really directly, they're not mine, I don't own them, but they influence me all the time. I'm looking at it can come through the, sorry, got thrown off. Ted just said he wanted to correct something, that if it's coming through the DNA, we really don't come in as a blank slate. I agree. It comes in through our cellular structure. It comes in through our memories, because I met with a homeopathic doctor 2 years ago and talked about obesity and food allergies and when do we start with babies, and he turned and he said, in vitro. Everything you eat, you teach your child to eat. Everything that you do, as far as sound, as far as joy, as far as anger, as far as, everything, you are imprinting into that DNA structure, your child. So by blank slate, I mean we don't come in with a consciousness of any pain that we're carrying that belongs to our relatives, our family before us, or anything like that. Thank you, Ted. That was a really good clarification. So when we become conscious, when we become aware, then we can stop the pattern and we can separate ourselves, take a look at it, do our work, and come back clean. So generational pain is something that we address a lot in families with kids, with teenagers and kids that are in this millennial or even younger than millennials, because they're coming in and saying, I'm not interested in carrying your stuff. I'm asking you to go do your work. And so I'm here to tap you on the shoulder and say, it's time. It's time to start exploring this idea of generational pain. And if you want someone to guide you through that, if you want some assistance, I'm a short strategic coach that works with parenting and issues like this. And you can find me, DeniseDrydenCoaching.com on the web. So I look forward to any contact from you if you have some questions or if you're curious. Meanwhile, enjoy your fall, enjoy this cold weather and this beautiful scenery behind me of fall happening on our property. You take care. Bye-bye.